Are you struggling to choose between water-based markers and alcohol-based markers? Or maybe you've tried water-based markers but hate how they break down your paper. In today's video, we're putting the new Ohuhu paper-friendly water-based markers to the test. I will start by comparing them to the popular Tombow brand, testing their paper friendliness on different types of paper. Then I will compare them with Ohuhu alcohol-based markers in terms of their shading performance and blending capabilities. Finally, I will demonstrate how to create a tree drawing using Ohuhu's new water-based markers, recreating an alcohol marker version I made in the past. Many of you have been asking, can you use water-based markers to follow along with my alcohol-based marker tutorials? I will be answering that later in this video. Ohuhu recently sent me their new paper-friendly water-based markers. Thank you to Ohuhu for sponsoring today's video. I got the 60 color set, and if you are interested, you can find the link in the description. Here is the color chart I made. You can pause to take a closer look to see if these colors might fit your needs. These markers come with a fine liner tip and a brush tip. Normally, water-based markers can cause paper to break down after about 6 to 12 layers, but Ohuhu's new water markers can handle up to 20 layers without damaging the paper. Of course, in most of my drawings, I only layer ink about 5 to 10 layers. We will see if these markers really prevent paper breaking down during typical use. Let's put them to the test. I want to remind you that no matter what types of markers you use, choosing the right paper is the key. I will admit I don't have much experience with water-based markers since my main medium is alcohol-based markers, so this video is also a bit of learning experience for me. Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. I would love to hear them. First, I'm going to test Ohuhu new water-based markers and Tombow water-based markers on different sketchbook to show you how many layers they can handle before the paper starts to wearing down. Each paper I will use has a different thickness and texture, so it will be interesting to see the results. We will start with the Pentalic sketchbook, which I've used in many of my older videos for alcohol mark drawings. I will quickly layer colors with both markers to see how they perform. The Tombow marker appears to show more grain, while the Ohuhu marker lays down color more smoothly. Tombow starts to peel the paper after about 5 to 6 layers, but the Ohuhu marker holds up much better, only starting to show sign of paper wear down around 20 layers. Keep in mind, I'm layering ink quickly here without letting the paper dry between layers. In an actual drawing, I will let each layer dry a bit before putting the new layer. Even though the Ohuhu marker doesn't wear down the paper, it does start to bleed through the back after around 10 to 15 layers, since the Pentalic sketchbook paper is quite thin. Next, I have my favorite paper for alcohol mark drawings, the Canson Mixed Media Sketchbook. What's interesting is that when using the new Ohuhu watermarkers, it actually shows more grain, while the Tombow marker lays down color more smoothly. However, Tombow starts to wear down the paper after about 10 layers, whereas the Ohuhu marker doesn't start peeling until around 20 to 22 layers. Next, I tested the Moleskine Sketchbook. Both markers perform smoothly here. Similar to the previous paper, Tombow start to peel after about 5 to 6 layers, while Ohuhu doesn't start peeling until around 12 to 14 layers. Next, I tried a different brand of mixed media paper, which is much thicker. This is a sketchbook I'll be using for the tree drawing later. Both markers lay down color smoothly, but Tombow starts peeling around 7 to 8 layers, while Ohuhu holds up until about 17 layers. For the last test, I used both markers on watercolor paper. I've heard that water-based markers perform way better on thicker papers like watercolor paper. Both markers look great on it, but since watercolor paper absorbs a lot of ink, I was concerned the pen might not last as long compared to other types of paper. Tombow starts wearing off the paper around 13 to 14 layers, but Ohuhu doesn't wear off even after 25 layers. I stopped here since it's not practical to keep adding more layers. I wanted to see how each marker blends with water, so I drew some simple shapes and then used a brush to apply layers of water and observe how the ink dissolved. Both markers work well on watercolor paper. and by adding water, you can create a watercolor-like effect. However, I found that the Ohuhu marker is a bit less dissolvable with water. After applying water, the drawing made with the Ohuhu marker is more visible than the one made with Tombow marker. But keep in mind, this is just one test on one type of watercolor paper, so different papers and brands could behave differently. Next, we will compare these two water-based markers with alcohol-based markers in terms of paper friendliness, shading capability, and blending. For the paper friendliness test, the Ohuhu water-based marker definitely outperformed the Tombow marker. However, alcohol-based markers are more paper-friendly than water-based markers overall. I layered a lot of ink on the same spot with alcohol markers, and it didn't wear off the paper. One thing to note is that the Ohuhu new water marker can bleed through the back of the paper if you layer it like 13 to 20 times. However, for typical use around 5 to 8 layers, it doesn't bleed. Keep in mind though, this can vary depending on the type of paper you are using. For shading capability, I wanted to see how many shades one marker can create. This is really important for me when choosing markers. If a marker can produce a range of shades, it saves both time and money. Ohuhu and Tombow performed very similarly. Ohuhu alcohol markers definitely had the edge. The shading is more subtle and the gradation is much smoother. This is one of the reasons I prefer alcohol markers. For the blending test, I didn't do very well and I did it a bit quickly. Both brands of water marker don't blend well on this mixed media paper, but they perform much better on watercolor paper. Overall though, alcohol markers blend more smoothly than water markers on regular paper. Plus, you can keep layering the ink in a short amount of time without worrying about tearing the paper. To show you the difference between water-based and alcohol-based marker in a typical drawing, I'm going to use the Ohuhu paper-friendly water-based marker to recreate an old drawing I did 4 years ago with cheap alcohol markers. I will follow my own tutorial step by step, but this time using water-based markers. If you have water-based markers, feel free to follow along. I will share my final thoughts during the coloring process. When coloring, I use the same technique I would with alcohol-based markers, starting with light colors and then moving on to darker ones. I also tried to maintain similar stroke directions to create a comparable texture. With alcohol markers, it's pretty easy to use just one marker to create a range of shades that help add depth and gradation to the drawing. But with water-based markers, it's a bit trickier. It is convenient that Ohuhu water markers don't wear off the paper easily, so I don't have to wait for the ink to dry before layering more. However, I did find that I need a wider range of color to achieve the same depth and effect compared to the alcohol markers. I decided to not use a blender marker or water for this drawing. When I do alcohol mark drawing, I like to keep things simple, no extra tool or blending steps. So I wanted to see how water markers perform on their own without any extra help. By the end of the video, you will see that the final result is surprisingly close to my alcohol mark drawing. The key difference is that alcohol mark version has more subtle gradation and smoother transitions. So if you're wondering if you can recreate my alcohol-based marker drawing using just water-based markers, yes, with the right colors, both water and alcohol markers can produce similar results. To get the best out of water-based markers, though using thicker paper like watercolor paper and blending with water really helps enhance the effect. Overall, I still prefer alcohol markers for their convenience and speed, but I'm definitely excited to explore more with water-based markers on watercolor paper. I'd love to hear about your experience and thoughts on this topic. Which one do you like better, water-based marker or alcohol-based marker? If you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment. I hope you found this video helpful. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.